This is going to be a long video. I'm sure you've noticed that these videos aren't very short. This one might be especially longer because there is just a lot to cover. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Hi, everyone. This is Lillian from Living with Charlotte. And if you haven't seen me before, I am a Charlotte Mason homeschool mom of two children. And I am a Charlotte Mason fangirl. I will shout it from the rooftops loud and proud. I just love all things Charlotte Mason. I love her philosophy, and I will probably keep repeating that over and over until you are probably sick of it. I am so sorry. Okay. Welcome to part 4 of my Alveary review series. It's 10 parts. And why am I doing this? It's because so many of you guys have been asking for me to do this. No, it's not that. It's not that at all. I'm just doing it, and I hope it's helpful. Shout out to everyone who has commented on my previous videos saying how helpful this has been. So thank you, all three of you. I hope this video is helpful for you too. While we are doing some shout outs, I want to shout out to my sponsor of the Alveary review series, Humble Heart Press. And I will just read this. Humble Heart Press and Alveary has partnered together to make their digital curriculum into beautiful physical books. I will show you later, actually, samples of what their products look like. And yeah, so just keep an eye out for that. So today we are going to do a deep dive into Alveary's English Language Arts Curriculum, ELA. And by the end of this video, you'll have a very comprehensive overview of how ELA is covered in Alveary and to see whether that is a good fit for your family. Okay, so let's get started. So, the way that Charlotte Mason envisioned English language arts, and she never used that term ELA, but she obviously talked a lot about it. She saw it as a interconnection of different web strands, if you will. So these strands would include reading, phonics, penmanship, copywork, dictation, grammar, narration, composition, and recitation. And then for the high school years, she encouraged students to have what's called a Commonplace book. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Today, we're going to walk through each of those strands and how they progress throughout the years in Alveary's curriculum. Reading and phonics for grades 1 to 3. So, Alveary actually sells this as a whole standalone product in their shop, and I'll make sure to link that in the description box below. But it really is a great standalone product as a reading program, and it's for grades 1 to 3. Um, so even if Alveary is not, you don't feel like it's a good fit for you, I would encourage you to check out the reading program, especially if you have younger kids and they're learning how to read. If you have older kids, you can definitely skip this section and just move on to the next chapter. If you have younger kids, let's keep going. Okay, grades 1 to 3. Alveary has created their own reading program in 3 levels, and it's built around the Free and Treadwell readers. If you're not familiar with those, I will link them down below. But these readers are excellent. They're great ways to encourage the study of reading. And they have the primer, first reader, and second reader that is used. These were published in the 1900s, early 1900s, and they include classic folk tales, fairy tales, nursery rhymes, and very familiar poems. They function as the living spine for the Alveary reading program. So, included in their reading program is all the teacher's instruction you'll need to carry out those lessons. And it's all based in Charlotte Mason's philosophy. In their particular reading program, they actually include, so the Alveary includes more phonological awareness and phonics instruction. So a note about that. I sometimes hear in Charlotte Mason circles that, Charlotte Mason was against phonics and she had a lot of criticisms against it. And so to do phonics instruction is not Charlotte Mason. So I will need to pause right there because if you know me, I like to clear up any kind of misunderstandings of Charlotte Mason's philosophy. And this might be one of them. She was never against using phonics instruction. Rather, she says that phonics knowledge is a necessary but secondary tool and children must learn letter sounds and word patterns, but reading should be taught primarily through meaningful, interesting words and rich text, and never through isolated or meaningless drills. So here's what she says in Volume 1, Home Education, and this is on page 216. For the second and less important part of our task, the child must know the sounds of the letters and acquire power to throw given sounds into new combinations. So that kind of sounds like phonics to me. Okay, so let's now go through a preview and a flip through of what the reading program looks like. Okay, I'm going to take you through the Alveary reading program level 1. And just a quick disclaimer, this is not a Humble Heart Press product. This is just printing by Lillian's printer. So it's not going to look as great. The quality is not as great. You will see samples of Humble Heart Press's printed products, but this is not it. So just wanted to say that. Okay, so level 1, you will find that in each of the levels 1 to 3, it'll have an introduction, and this is where you can kind of get your bearings on how to understand Charlotte Mason's philosophy about reading and how to implement these reading lessons for this particular level. So this is going to be very helpful to go through. There are supplementary materials and printables that you will use throughout the lessons, and just other helpful resources that also incorporate some of the modern research about reading, and a lot of it really jives and builds upon Charlotte Mason's principles and her philosophy. Okay, so getting into what these lessons will look like, you'll see that for level 1, it'll go through Free and Treadwell Primer, and it'll go through each story one by one, and there'll be several lessons that cover each story. So, for example, story 1, The Little Red Hen, they will start off with a picture walk, and students will look at the illustrations before reading a single word, and they will narrate what they see. And they'll make predictions about what's going to happen in the story and just start to build their vocabulary as they learn how to read. Okay, so here's lesson 1, and there's a lot of just teacher instruction that is included here, and again, just how to go through these lessons. And there's usually a section where the teacher will read aloud um, a couple pages of that first story, and then a chance for the student to narrate. So here we see in lesson 2, they have their beginning narration prompts. And so this will again help increase that skill. What we'll also see in these lessons are things that are called phonogram work. And I'll just give you a little example of that here. So phonogram, word work, and they will use some of those printables, and each lesson will either introduce or review a specific phonogram, and it's always one that appears in that current story. So the phonics instruction, it's never abstract. It's always grounded in a word that the child has just heard or they will be reading. So, for example, there's another story called The Boy and the Goat, which introduces the phonogram OA because the word goat is on every page of that story. Same thing, The Pancake. uses compound word study because pancake is itself a compound word. So, bit by bit throughout levels 1, 2, and 3, by the time they're done with level 3, they would have covered a majority of all the phonograms that they would come across in the English language. Some other things I wanted to point out: word work. So they'll use what's called letter tiles. That's also part of the printables, and students will be able to physically build up words with the letter tiles. So they'll either make the word or break them apart. They'll swap the letter tiles with beginning consonants or changing the middle and forming rhyming words. And they'll also play fun games with the words that they're creating. And that will just again give them extra practice with phonogram awareness. Another thing that they start to introduce is what's called a word journal. And the word journal is basically a blank journal that runs continuously across all 3 levels. And students record new vocabulary words and they'll group the words by their phonogram patterns. And then they'll also add copywork sentences in their word journals and eventually include dictation passages, and it becomes like their own personal record of language acquisition across the 3 levels. Another thing I want to point out is what they have called our red words. And these are high frequency irregular words. So words that can't be decoded with the currently known phonograms that they're studying. There'll be a lot of these irregular phonemes, and across again each of the levels they'll add more of these red words, and it'll always show up in red. And as they start to do this, they'll start to see that these quote unquote irregularities are actually explainable through what's called morphology or etymology. So, etymology, there are sometimes these lessons that are optional, but they do cover word history or etymology. And these are just really great ways to just add something really delightful to the study of reading. And they're usually written in an accessible story like way. As you go through these levels, they will also include sections on grammar that are really just naturally woven into the lessons. It's not really something that's studied separately through the reading program. And they'll work with printed sentence cards, they'll rearrange the word cards into correct order, and they'll learn about punctuation, capitalization, and discuss even parts of speech as it appears throughout the reader and the stories that they're reading. And then by the time they're in level 3, students are building on each of these exercises towards achieving independent reading. So, one lesson format has them read a poem or a short passage silently to themselves. They'll mark interesting or unfamiliar words on sticky notes and then bring those words to the lesson conversation. And the teacher's guide explicitly instructs teachers to reserve the reader for lesson time only. And again, this is in level 3, so that it retains novelty and anticipation. And students should be reading their own self selected books and library books daily outside of lesson times. So that was a flip through of Alveary's reading program, just through level 1. Let me know if you'd like to see a flip through of levels 2 or 3. You can let me know in the comments below. And again, that reading program is pretty excellent just as a standalone program. So I would actually recommend that one, even if, again, you're not considering Alveary, but the reading program itself is a pretty good product. So I will link that below in my description box so you can check that out. Let's get into penmanship and copywork. So from grades 1 through 8, Alveary uses what's called the Getty-Dubay Italic handwriting series. They also provide another option that you can use. It's the Penny Gardner handwriting, beautiful handwriting for children. So that is a different option that might work out well. And alongside that, they have curated copywork passages. And the approach that they use with penmanship and copywork is very in line with Charlotte Mason's philosophy. So, in volume one, Charlotte Mason wrote that children should be encouraged to look at the word, see a picture of it with their eyes shut, and then write from memory. So that this actually kind of sounds like a picture study too. So it's very similar. So now as students move into grades 4 through 8, copywork transitions from individual letters and words to short passages that are drawn from the books that they're actually reading. And all these passages are compiled into one book for their copywork and dictation lessons. So it makes it really easy for them to, when it's time for copywork, they don't have to flip through all the books that they're actually reading, but it has it all printed out in one booklet. So they're copying from, their living history book or their nature reading or their Bible passages, and it's just coming across from all their lessons. Now, by high school, penmanship and copywork transform into keeping a commonplace book, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Okay, let's talk about dictation. So, dictation, the Alveary gives very detailed instructions on how to conduct dictation lessons, which is really great and super helpful. So, dictation, it starts in grades 4 and goes through grade 9, and it begins at doing dictation 3 times per week. And then it starts to decrease over time as they start to enter their high school years. And Alvieri's teacher notes even acknowledge that by grade 9, depending on the student, dictation may or may not be necessary. So it really depends on what the student will need to further their dictation skill. So, one thing to note about dictation, this is not spelling. So, spelling is not taught as its own separate subject. That was actually something that Charlotte Mason uh, did not think was necessary. Spelling really develops organically through the combination of copywork, of dictation, and later on etymology in the reading lessons. Okay, moving on to grammar. Now let's talk about grammar. Grammar is introduced in grade 4, and Alveary uses a lot of Michael Clay Thompson's curriculum, or MCT. I'll just be referring to it as MCT for short. And in grade 4, they will do Grammar Island. Grade 5 is Sentence Island. Grade 6 is Grammar Town. Grade 7, Paragraph Town. And in grade 8, Grammar Voyage. So, grammar is scheduled just 2 sessions per week at about 15 to 20 minutes. If you're not familiar with the Michael Clay Thompson series, it is genuinely beloved by many homeschools, and it's written in a narrative style, which works really well for Charlotte Mason, and it gives it a more of a living book quality than a standard or traditional grammar textbook. So students learn parts of speech through what's called the 4 level analysis, and it really approaches language as literary archaeologists rather than grammar robots. Now, in high school, grammar shifts significantly. By grade 9, students move into MCT's essay voyage, which is less about grammar rules and more about the art of writing. And by grade 10, lessons are geared towards word study and etymology, such as reading through Caesar's English Part 2, and this is where they'll learn all about the deep roots and history of the English language. And that is also a Michael Clay Thompson curriculum. Now, by grades 11 and 12, formal grammar completely drops from the curriculum, and students are now doing more writing, revising, and developing their voice. Okay, so Speaking of writing, let's now talk about narration and composition. So, oral narration is continuing throughout all the grades. And if you've seen my other videos, you know that Alveary has creatively included narration prompts throughout the lessons, and they're just scattered throughout all the subjects. Grade 3 is when written narration makes its first appearance. And it just starts off once per week, just 10 minutes. And you might ask, when is a student ready for written narration? And Alveary says that students who are not yet secure with their penmanship are not yet ready for written narration. So definitely keep developing the penmanship skills so that by the time they start with written narration, it's not as physically taxing. From grade 3 and forward, written narration builds incrementally, so it'll start off as once a week for grades 3 and 4. For grade 5, it's 3 times a week. Grade 6, 5 times a week. Grade 7, it'll be 6 narrations and 2 compositions. Grade 8 is 8 narrations and 2 compositions a week. And then grades 9 to 12, it'll be 5 to 10 narrations per week, along with some other composition assignments scattered throughout. So, Alveary gives teachers a lot of creative flexibility in their suggestions for how to do narrations. So, students can write them as diary entries, as letters, as poems, as comic strips, interviews, news reports. So, that range of forms keeps narrations fresh and prevents it from becoming a mechanical exercise. Now, in grades 7 and 8, composition enters the picture. And Alveary, they do separate written narrations from compositions. And here's what I mean. So, narration, they define as merely telling back. It has freedom and creativity for how you tell back what they just read. Composition is about structured practice of specific writing skills. So, comparing and contrasting, writing descriptions, writing letters, and eventually writing essays. By high school, composition really takes center stage. So in grades 9, students will work through Essay Voyage, which is that MCT curriculum, and they're going to learn about essay structure, about tone, point of view, and argumentation. And in grades 10 to 12, this is where they'll study more formal writing styles. So, some books that they will go through are called Style, The Basics of Clarity and Grace by Williams and Bishop. And this is all about learning to edit and revise their prose with intention. Another book is Steering the Craft by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is more for literary writing. Another one is Advanced Academic Writing, Part 2, which includes topics like logical fallacies, ethics of communication, and research habits. And finally, another one, The Craft of Research. So, this is specifically preparing them for academic writing, citations, and engaging with scholarly conversation. So, if you haven't heard, Alveary, they recently made their book list public. So, they might have added a few new ones last time I checked. So, go ahead and check that out. I will link that in the description below if you haven't seen their public book list. And you'll get a sense of all the different books that they use in their ELA curriculum. So, by the time a student has gone through Alveary's ELA curriculum, they will have moved all the way from narration of a folk tale all the way to researching and writing within an academic discourse. Okay, now I'm going to take you through a flip through of the language study program for grade 8. And again, let me know in the comments below if you want to see other grades that you'd like me to flip through. Now, this is a good time to remind you about my sponsor, Humble Heart Press. This is a Humble Heart Press product, not Lillian's printer, but Humble Heart Press, who is the printing partner for Alveary. So they have partnered together with Alveary to bind all the curriculum guides that they have, and you can see that it's, really great quality paper and binding. It's a lay flat type of binding, so you can see that it'll be very helpful for it to just lay nicely on the table, really sturdy paper, and it's already formatted and packaged for you, and it'll be mailed directly to you if you would like a printed version of Alveary's curriculum. So thank you, Humble Heart Press, for sponsoring these Alveary series videos. And another thing to note about Humble Heart Press, they're also an option to really print any kind of digital PDF curriculum that you have. So it's not just for Alveary. You can, upload whatever type of curriculum that you've purchased and get a really nice physical printing of that curriculum. So again, shout out to Humble Heart Press. Okay, so let's get into the language study lesson plans. Okay, so this is the lesson plans for grade 8. And you'll see that a lot of the formatting is going to be very similar to how we've seen their other lesson plans. They'll give a description of the course and any placement and combining tips. Scheduling, so here you'll see how many times that each of these strands are scheduled. So we see how for grade 8, there's composition, narration, copywork, and then day 2, there's grammar, composition, written narration, copywork. So you'll see how many times it's getting scheduled throughout the week. Planning and prep, so this will be really helpful to get that teacher instruction on how to go about doing ELA lessons. Books and supplies. So here's what I was talking about here, where they compile all of the copywork and dictation passages into one nice book, and they will have that here. And quick links for any of the other resources that they use. And just a reminder, these QR codes, this is for you to, if you're using this curriculum and you have your phone and you want to access any of these links, you can always scan the QR code and pull up the links on your phone or your tablet. Okay, so in the language study guide, we also have instructions on how to teach grammar and instructions on how to teach dictation. And so there are very specific steps that are involved in teaching dictation, so they have laid that out really nicely. Now I'm going to take you through what 1 week will look like. So this would be week 1. And as you see, so week 1, first day is copywork, second day is dictation. And you'll see these little boxes. And this is really more like a tracker for the student to keep track of making sure that they do copywork 5 times in a week. Same thing with dictation, that they do that twice a week. There's a tracker for written narrations. So that's here on this page. And keep in mind for written narrations, 8th grade students are now typing a lot of their narrations. So that's why if you kind of felt like, wow, that's a lot of written narrations, I believe there's 8 in here. But they actually are capable of getting a lot of them done because they are typing. And then again, composition assignments are different from written narrations, and usually they are tied into the readings from their other lessons. And this will be a reference for, which composition that they're doing with which lesson and which book. They'll have that here in the teacher notes. And then same thing with the other lessons. These also have exams included. So these are the exams, and you'll see that there's an exam question for grammar, for dictation, and for copywork. And that'll be available across each of the terms. Okay, now let's talk about recitation. And recitation is one of the more distinctly Charlotte Mason aspects to an ELA program. From grade 3 onward, students spend 10 minutes every day in formal recitation, and the structure stays remarkably consistent across all the grades. Each term, students are working toward being able to recite and read beautifully from memory. And I'll just list these off here: one hymn, an Old Testament passage, a New Testament passage, a psalm, and one poem or Shakespeare passage if they're starting in grades 4 to 6. So, and this is all information based on this past year, since that's what I have access to in 2025 to 2026. So, in the early grades, selections include things like Christina Rossetti's Who Has Seen the Wind and Psalm 23. In the middle grades, the selections grow longer and more substantial. And there's passages from Joshua 1, Psalm 57, and the opening of John's Gospel, and Longfellow's Evangeline. And by high school, students are tackling even larger passages like Paradise Lost and Shakespeare's Macbeth, poems by Anne Bradstreet and Sor Juan Inés de la Cruz. So, as students move more into the upper years in high school, the amount of recitation sessions actually drops to 3 instead of 5 per week. And that's because they're given much more freedom in choosing their own passages and to be more student led and take more ownership over their learning. So, the passages that are assigned for recitation are usually poetry and scripture in grades 9 to 12. And the lesson plans, again, they do encourage the students to go beyond these suggestions and choose meaningful pieces from what they're currently reading. So now I'll take you through a preview of what their recitation lessons look like. Here is what the recitation lessons look like. And actually, what you will notice is the lessons are really more of a tracker. And it's all about just assigning which recitation passage to go through. This is a really helpful teaching instruction here, how to teach recitation, and plenty of teacher's notes to get you started. And so you'll see here on this page, you'll see for each day of the week which recitation passage that they can practice. And it'll basically just cycle through those recitation passages. And that's really all it looks like for the rest of the lesson plan. It's really this tracker to help you keep cycling through all the recitation passages. And then for exams, it's basically reciting one of the passages that they've been working on from memory. Okay, so this is another thing that students will get as part of their recitation work, and this is the Our Work booklet. And they have these per grade level, or sometimes some of the grades are combined. And this is where all their recitation passages and songs, hymns, folk songs that they're working on, any artist study that they're going through, it's all included in this nice little booklet. And again, this is a Humble Heart Press product as the printed product. This will also be in color, by the way. So I know I had mentioned in previous videos that Humble Heart Press will print a lot of the lesson plan guides in black and white, but the Our Book booklet will be in color since it makes it for a much more useful experience, and I'll kind of show you what I mean by that. But here you will see that all the recitation passages are compiled here for the student, which makes it really easy as they're going through their recitation to just cycle through these and practice those. And overall, This is, again, just a beautiful booklet that will cover the recitation passages, the poems, the artist studies and songs and all of that. So, okay, guys, thank you for sticking with me. We are landing this plane. We are almost there. I'm so glad you made it to this point. So, we're almost done. Okay. Commonplace book. Let me get into the commonplace book. Now, if you haven't heard of what a commonplace book is, it is essentially a personal journal where students can copy passages, quotes, poems, and just any living ideas that strike them as they go through their lessons and their readings. And you can see it as a natural evolution out of copywork from the younger years, and students who spent years carefully copying sentences from their books are now invited to become their own curators of truth, beauty, and goodness. Now, Charlotte Mason herself kept a commonplace book, and she encouraged her students to do the same. She believed that collecting beautiful language was one of the marks of an educated person and a way of surrounding oneself with wisdom and beauty, even when the books that contained them were not at hand. So, Alveary schedules the commonplace book just once per week for 10 minutes in the afternoon. Okay, so overall, the Alveary's ELA curriculum, their besides their grades 1 through 3 reading program, essentially what they are doing is they've brought together curricula from other publishers that aren't necessarily Charlotte Mason, but they have incorporated many of her methods without explicitly calling themselves a Charlotte Mason publisher. And what Alveary does is they add value by taking care of the pace and the progression, and by training the teacher inside their lesson plans on how to lead these lessons utilizing these different publications. So the progression is coherent, it's well planned. You can kind of see that there's this very clear intentional arc across their ELA program, so that by the time they're going through that program and they reach grade 12, they are, writing academic essays, and they know how to utilize proper research citations, and it's not this kind of discordant patchwork of lessons, but it really has a cohesive whole to the program. Again, narration is generally central, and narration really drives the core of the ELA spine from grades 3 to 12. And the variety of narration really keeps things fresh. So that is it for this deep dive. If you made it to this point in the video, oh my gosh, kudos to you. You're doing great. So make sure you check out the rest of my Alveary deep dive series. It will come up right here, and you can click on that link to check out the rest of the playlist. And again, this is going to be a 10-part series, so make sure you stay tuned for the rest of the series when it drops. And if you liked this video, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and all of that good stuff. And if you feel like someone else could really benefit from these videos, please share it with them. And that would really help out what I'm doing to serve the Charlotte Mason community. Please comment below. If you haven't noticed, I do respond to every single comment on these videos. So please comment below if there's anything that was helpful for you, or if there's anything that you'd like to see in future deep dive reviews, even if there's a curriculum that you would like me to review. Again, I'm not limiting these reviews to like the bigger publishers like Alveary. I do eventually want to cover the more boutique publishers. So, again, just leave those in the comments below if there's anything you'd like me to review. And if you want me to do a flip through for different grade levels, again, that's something you can tell me in the comments, and I'll make sure to record those videos for you. And last but not least, if you have not seen my Big Five Charlotte Mason curriculum decision matrix. So Big Five, including Alveary, Ambleside Online, A Gentle Feast, the CMEC, and Simply Charlotte Mason is what I'm referring to as the Big Five. If you are considering one of those and you need some help and some guidance on which one might be a good fit for you, please click on the link below and sign up for my freebie that will basically be a decision matrix to help guide you in that decision. And hopefully that will, take a little bit of load off. I know we're all kind of looking at curriculum around this time of the year. So, again, I hope that is helpful for you. And that is it for this deep dive. I will see you in the next one. Bye.